If you're trying to get into foreign films and you're just constantly being upstaged by these film snobs, I'm going to give you a chance to really stump them. Because if your main goal is to find rare, well-crafted artistic achievement, you're still going to be missing out on all the good stuff. Do you really need to see another lost silent film from Argentina? What is the camera even for if it's not to allow us to see things that we haven't already seen before? I think it's about time we test the structural integrity of that thinking jelly that everyone's so proud of up there. So we're going to do a quick tour of worldwide cinema that was truly for the people. As an academic, there's even a control for this experiment, because I found 3 different movies from 3 different countries, all very clearly ripping off the Spielberg classic E.T., which is a great opportunity for us to see the unique ways in which this familiar story is told through the lenses of these individual countries. Name a film school that can do better than that. Now, our first stop is the nation of Turkey. Now, Turkey has some notoriety in the knockoff world of cinema already. Many by this point have become aware of the Turkish Star Wars, which came out a year before this. These movies have an anarchic feel that goes beyond just stealing ideas. These movies will turn your whole ass mind into a lawless mess. Because this audience was fresh off a coup d'etat, and they needed to see during economic and political strife, coherency and realism really only gets in the way. So Turkey now gives us their ET equivalent, Body. This movie right away makes it very clear, and this is similar between all 3 of these, is that they're trying to copy a movie where the audience is required to bond with this little alien. And this movie came up with one of the most putrid, uncanny, and frightening fabricated creatures of all time. And he looks like a kid tried to sculpt a xenomorph out of human feces. Look at this thing's face. Like, that's nothing like the poster. But then again, I don't know if the Enterprise or anything else on this poster is showing up either. Every time this creature shows up and starts waddling around, my brain is paralyzed by confusion. And check out this sound this thing makes. Listening to this croak is triggering my gag reflex. And I have to listen to that sound come out of that creature, and I'm somehow supposed to watch children act like they love this thing? Ugh, they're just straight putting their lips on it. But then again, that reminds me, these kids aren't exactly that much easier to like than Body is. The kids in this somehow have the power to make you feel like you're being eaten alive by rats. For one thing, something that a lot of lower budget foreign movies did at this time was actually dub like your whole movie to make sound recording easier. And often when they did this, you could easily tell because the natural volume of their voices, it just cranked to broil at times. And the worst victims of this were child actors, because they usually just got like adult women or something and just did their most painful falsetto voice they possibly could come up with.
Yes, I did. I saw her face. She was waving and I could read her mouth.
So we're on the wrong foot with these characters from the very beginning. Especially this kid, who actually seems like a cute kid naturally, but it's hard to like a character who keeps making your ears bleed. And beyond the sound stuff, they're just the nastiest little brats. They're constantly fighting and harassing each other. You can just look at this kid and see the trouble oozing out of him. So then you get them all into the exact same room and they're all yelling nonsense over each other with that ruthless dub. And in case there was any charm left, they also made this movie super bleak. You know, there was a moment where I thought, I just wish someone would parent these kids, right? Except 90% of the adults in here are terrifyingly angry men. I didn't think anything could give me sympathy for this kid until I saw him being chased around by this absolute warrior of a father figure. He almost makes me want to run out and buy some purple silk pajamas, to be honest. But, I mean, living with this guy must be like living with a bull. He just charges at anything under 4 feet tall attempting to beat it. In fact, he just sees this short figure in its body, and he almost smashes his bulbous brain in before a moment of pure movie magic. You know, it's just one of those scenes where the mystery of it all, about what is even happening, is better left a mystery. But now, what about the other men with healthy-looking mustaches in this town? This guy? Oh, well, turns out this guy gets so annoyed by this harmless dog that he lines up a whole school full of children and publicly executes it like a POW in Vietnam. This whole thing leaves children in the fetal position sobbing. How about anyone else? Well, it turns out every man in this village is the exact same age and all have rabies or something, because when Body Crash lands, Every single one of them had the first instinct of grabbing a farm tool and stampeding to murder it. The whole thing was almost terrible enough for me to support the kids trying to smuggle him around. Which they do, and we get to experience them having some iconic ET alien bonding time. Then he starts like putting his hands on the kids, and I start noticing how much they're kissing him, and I just start to feel queasy again. He's like taking them at night to amusement parks without any of their parents. And really, having to ask myself if Body was grooming these children was the last thing I wanted to wonder right now. Besides, he eventually starts traumatizing all the adults, giving us another moment of pure movie magic. I'm pretty sure Body even kills someone at some point. You're soon just back to cheering on the creepy guys who at this point are stalking them trying to steal this alien. But once he gets captured, this kid just goes absolutely catatonic with grief. Kinda, in my opinion, proving that their relationship was probably a little bit unhealthy. And oh boy, he's back. But no, it's just the locals showing him his smoking body in the back of a trunk like this is a mafia movie or something. Is this what a child's domestic fantasy drama looked like in Turkey in the early 80s? Actually, quite possibly, because the kids basically have themselves a little mini coup against the adults of the town. Like a more kid-friendly version of what happened just like 3 years earlier. They do manage to save Body and go on the world-famous ET flight Turkish style, which of course is another moment of complete beauty. And right when you are absolutely sick of feeling bad for the characters you never liked in the first place, now it's time to say goodbye to Body as he goes to space. And to make them sad, it really looks like someone did something to really make those kids sob. And I am too scared to ask what it was. So the end of a beautiful, bleak adventure to start to finish, a real mouthful of Turkish delight. Okay, so the same year, hot off the tail of E.T.'s release, and a copycat approach to the title that's about as obtuse as possible, now Body is a surprise in how poorly it was made. But despite coming from the more affluent film industry of Spain, this one really isn't that much better. Body, at the very least, has sort of like this grassroots feel, and was really meant just for Turkish audiences. The creative theft and genre slop that was happening in Spain at this time was almost comical. And this was all being perpetrated by sleazy dudes directing from lawn chairs, drunk on wine at 11 a.m. And this was all part of a much larger industry of Euro horror that was really booming at this time, which was a movement the director of this movie, Juan Piquer Simon, was at the center of. A director who made his name with the gory slasher Pieces in a movie about killer slugs. But shamelessness aside, if you ask me, that is a fascinating place to start with a ripoff of a family blockbuster. The sleazy adult appeal of Euro horror is about as far away from the sensitive domestic appeal of E.T. But there was money to be made, and surely they would know to temper themselves out a little bit, right? But no, this whole thing is framed like it's a Creature in the Woods movie from start to finish. You have a bunch of socialites riddled with problematic sexuality and personalities. I love how one of the most central leads in this is introduced as a guy who berates his girlfriend in front of everyone.
And you?
Me what? Come on, out with it.
You came in half a beat late.
And then makes out with her 5 minutes later.
Just forget it, will you? You know I didn't mean anything.
And us?
Only to get everyone together for a camping trip afterwards, and he wound up inviting 2 romantic interests on the same trip.
Making out with chicks is part of his act as an artist.
But a bunch of 30-something-year-olds acting like teenagers, going out and getting horny in the woods. I mean, that's sort of like the details of like the mysterious enchanted E.T. build-up, right? They definitely were very, very inspired by the foggy forest in the beginning. It's like they wanted this dark, eerie mood, and when it turned out to be like crystal clear and blustery on shooting day, the solution was simply crank those machines until it looked like a forest fire with no flames. But really, you can't understand the levels of questionable decision-making until you've experienced how willing this movie is to waste your time. This movie came from a siesta culture. Going nowhere fast is a way of life. These people knew that the stress of worrying about things like continuity or even structure is just gonna kill you in the end. I know you're looking for a weird kid and an alien we promised you on the cover, but take a minute to just hang out and bicker by the lake for like 20 minutes first. Don't worry about the fact that it starts snowing only hours after their little picnic. Everything makes sense if you just think about it. Except this guy who finds eggs in a glowing cave and his first instinct is to go full caveman and smash them up, ruining what could have been a much more sweet movie. Because the mother of those eggs apparently sees it and spins his jaw. Now she's pissed and starts throwing people off of cliffs.
She's out cold.
Finally turning into the monster movie that this was never meant to be. It's pretty hilarious how these people eventually end up hitting almost all those beats.
The phone's not working. The road back to town is blocked. Looks like there's no way out of here.
And everything you were promised on the cover and the premise is just sandwiched very briefly in the middle of all of that. And that's when this magnificent child actor, again, with a painfully dubbed voice,
Well, Trumpy, do you get it?
finds himself an egg, and instead of being repulsed by this sight in his bed and turning it into an embryo omelet like the other guy, he feeds it milk and is nice to it. And it's a real shame that they couldn't have made the whole movie up this alley, but I have to say that these scenes with the kid and his alien make for movie magic. And look at these special effects. I don't even know how they did that. I'd totally watch an hour of this ugly thing making stop motion and snorting lines of peanuts any day. But like I said, believe it or not, the kid stuff, it only lasts for a few minutes. I could tolerate the horror stuff a lot more too if they showed more of this monster design that's meant to be cute enough to be a kid's friend, but also scary to us at the same time. But regardless of it all, I do think this movie actually did, for a moment, synthesize the ET family stuff and Creature in the Woods horror into something really great, even if it was just for a moment. Because there's a part where this kid sees the alien just going absolutely ape on this lady, and he thinks it's his friend.
Trumpy.
More of this would have saved even this movie.
There. Why did you kill that girl? Why did you do that? Now I can't be your friend anymore.
Another very, very classic niche that pretty much doesn't exist anywhere else. Hey, now, almost a decade later, 1991, you'd think the market for ET copycats might have died down by now. But not in the Philippines, where they were experiencing their own copycat boom. Particularly with the filmmaker and comedian duo Tony Y. Reyes and Joey De Leon. Which during this time, there were moments where they were making like 10 movies a year together. And most of them included at least some kind of creative theft. But we're here to see what makes that slapdash style so special. So starting with a beautifully timed explosion out of the ocean by a Filipino village. It's now time to see our third abomination. Now, I don't think I would say this if I weren't comparing the alien in this to an actual murderer in an organ transplant gone wrong. But the alien in this does somehow feel like a little less threatening. But then again, I don't really know how I would describe the way this alien makes me feel. Because it definitely isn't anything good. I mean, how would you describe the sound this thing makes? Something like a ghostly panic attack, maybe? Like, all I know is I start having to catch my breath after listening to it for too long. I'd tell you that I hated it, but there's these like random moments where the alien just kind of screams, and I kind of love those moments. But the sound is coming out of this thing, which is almost as confusing to look at. You know, they added a little color so he looks a little less grotesque and primitive. But his head is covered in what looks like tentacle suctions, and they just did not have to do that. But other than that, it's really not so bad as long as you don't look him in the eyes. Because if you do that, it's honestly one of the most horrific things that we've seen so far watching these. But this is the closest to a fun, family-oriented movie than any of the others we've seen. And probably hit on the most iconic moments from E.T. In fact, this movie's even brave enough to just straight up acknowledge that it's ripping that movie off.
Naalala mo ba yung napanood natin? Si Extraterrestrial?
It's just kind of, you know, without those soft, nice edges of Western kids cinema we expect. For example, the group of children who are fated to find this creature asks their grandma about aliens, and she starts with the classic tradition of making stuff up to terrify your children into behaving.
Nang hindi kayo kunin ng mga nilikang yon, ha?
Opo, Lola Panchang.
And here's something I bet you've never seen in a movie before. One of the child actors here seems to have some kind of tic or something where he waves his arms like this every word he says. Like, it didn't matter if he was happy,
Yay!
Oh, Empoy, wag kang malikot.
scared, trying to whisper. There's moments where it looks like his co-star's doing everything in his will to not be distracted while talking to him in scenes. Maybe I should give this movie a point for like representation of just casually having someone with a tic like this in your movie. But then the little girl makes fun of him at the dinner table for it.
Tama na.
But the biggest curveball this movie tosses us is that this is ultimately a story of these kids sharing Catholicism with the alien. Which sounds bizarre, but is actually maybe the more intuitive story to tell about a group of kids being raised by their grandma in the Philippines. But this movie takes great pains to emphasize that this alien soul is getting saved. And as long as that was happening, it really didn't matter to me how belabored this was. I was perpetually slack-jawed watching this dysgenic Teletubby gaze at the crucifix across himself. But we're not done mixing it up, because once you're settling into this folksy religious alien story, as one does, this movie swerves with oddly inappropriate jokes. We're working with comments like this.
Si Lorna, si Pe.
Abay, tignan mo nga naman ano. Dati, kinakalong-kalong ko lang yan. Ngayon, hindi ko na pwedeng kalungin.
At one point, the subtitles were kind enough to explain that their nickname they gave to the alien is a penis pun.
Nating titi.
And children making dick jokes is one thing, but they played it out enough to really, truly maximize the discomfort you should experience. Even their bonding time with the alien is extra gritty. Like, this sassy guy is just loving life, and then they basically murder him by drowning while they laugh. You know, the alien uses his magic to save him, but I'm not really convinced that he made it in time. Soon enough, you're watching a crime thriller when everyone starts trying to kidnap the alien. You have these terrifying faces behind pantyhose with guns. But then again, like, why worry when you have tiny children with wooden boards fighting their way through the cartel? And I'll just say, after seeing enough American movies that just kind of give the kids junk like squirt guns to fight the bad guys with, it's very refreshing to see some children actually beating ass. Who would have guessed that it was the religious one that happened? I also really appreciated how at the end, when the alien has to go inevitably, the alien openly had no reason to leave, just up and left. I can guarantee between all three of these, you're seeing twists and turns that no Western filmmaker's coming up with. And if they do, it's always like this like insincere intellectual kitsch and stuff like that. This is authentic. This is real. Now you can just casually bring up body around your film friends and just say it's a Turkish film from the early 1980s. And everyone will just not know what you're talking about and be impressed.